You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
I think the part that gets me the most is how ordinary the moment was. No storm. No dramatic music. Just a laundry basket and a faint, unfamiliar smell. That night, I'd come home from work around 6. My manager had called an impromptu end-of-day check-in, which meant I was already behind on dinner. I stopped for gas on the way home, grabbed a drive-through burrito I regretted by the third bite, and walked through the door of our suburban two-story like I'd done 1,000 times. Casey was already home. I heard the faint sound of water running upstairs, probably a shower, and the soft hum of her favorite playlist coming from the kitchen speaker. She always played that same moody acoustic set when she cooked. I used to love that about her, the way she made even the most routine stuff feel intentional. Cozy. I tossed my keys in the bowl by the door and dropped my bag on the bench. I hadn't even taken my shoes off when I saw the laundry basket by the stairs. Overflowing again. I sighed and crouched down, grabbing a handful of wrinkled clothes to toss into the wash. I figured I'd start the machine, maybe clean the pans in the sink, get ahead for once. Be helpful. That's when I noticed the shirt. It was white. Plain. A crewneck tee, folded over on itself like it had been carelessly thrown into the pile. Nothing about it stood out except for the smell. It hit me the second I picked it up. Cologne. But not mine. This wasn't the faint scent of deodorant or detergent. This was bold, calculated. It had that sharp citrus top note, followed by something deeper, cedarwood, maybe. Not Dr. store stuff either. This was designer. Something you'd wear to make an impression. I didn't wear cologne like that. And I sure as hell didn't own a shirt like this. I held it up. Medium. Slim fit. Looked too small for me, actually. I sniffed it again, more deliberately this time. Definitely not mine. Hey, babe. I called up the stairs. Water off. Silence. Then footsteps. Casey appeared at the top of the staircase, towel drying her hair. Yeah? I held the shirt up like a question mark. Is this yours? She squinted, then made her way down slowly, padding barefoot. When she reached the last step, she tilted her head and gave it a once-over. Oh yeah, weird. That must have gotten mixed up at yoga, she said, already turning to head toward the kitchen. We use a shared locker room sometimes. Probably one of the girls grabbed the wrong one or something. Her voice didn't crack. She didn't miss a beat. It was one of those casual explanations that comes out so smoothly you almost feel guilty for doubting it. Almost. I followed her to the kitchen, shirt still in hand. Locker room? I thought you guys had cubbies or something. She opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of white wine. Not always. Sometimes we change in the back, especially when we're rushing after class. It's no big deal, Alex. She poured herself a glass without offering me one. Not that I wanted any, I was still thinking about the shirt. You sure this isn't one of mine? I asked, more to myself than to her. She ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* I gave a half smile, forcing a chuckle I didn't mean. Fair point. But the longer I stood there, the more the explanation unraveled in my head. Casey was meticulous. She always separated our laundry. Whites, darks, delicates, each in their own basket. The idea that she'd mix up a stranger's shirt with ours? It didn't track. Not with her. And then there was the cologne. No guy casually tosses a freshly cologned shirt into a pile. That kind of smell lingers. It meant someone had worn it recently. Like, within the last few hours. Days, max? It hadn't been sitting in a bin somewhere. But I said nothing. Just gave her a nod and tossed the shirt on the back of a chair. Inside, though, something shifted. Like the click of a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, but you forced it in anyway. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Paranoia? Curiosity? Sadness? All I knew was, from that moment on, the world I thought I understood started to feel tilted. We didn't talk about the shirt again. The rest of the night unfolded like normal, at least on the surface. She made pasta. I loaded the dishwasher. We watched half an episode of something forgettable before she said she was tired and went upstairs. I stayed behind, pretending to scroll through my phone. The shirt was still on the chair. I stared at it. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. That maybe I really was overthinking things. That maybe the world was exactly as boring and predictable as it had always been, and that I was just in a weird mood. Stress. Work. Fatigue. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Like something was fraying at the edges of my life, and no one else noticed but me. When I finally headed upstairs, Casey was already in bed. Lights off. She was turned away as she usually was lately. Curled on her side, one leg tucked under the blanket, the other bare. I stood there for a second longer than necessary, watching the faint rise and fall of her shoulders. "Night," I said softly. She mumbled something back, inaudible. I slipped under the covers, the bed colder than I remembered. That night I dreamt about locks. That's all I remember. Padlocks, combination locks, deadbolts. All of them closed. All of them missing keys. I woke up in a cold sweat around 3 a.m. and stared at the ceiling for nearly an hour. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I got up, walked downstairs, and turned on the laundry room light. The shirt was still there, right where I'd left it. I picked it up again, slowly this time. Turned it over in my hands. No tags. No brand markings. Not even a laundry instruction label. Just clean white cotton and that same unfamiliar scent, now fainter but still unmistakable. I didn't know what I was looking for. Clues? Answers? Anything. Instead, I folded the shirt neatly and placed it on the dryer. I stood there for another minute just staring at it, then turned the light off and went back to bed. Casey didn't stir when I returned. She was sound asleep or pretending to be. I lay awake until the sun came up, wondering what else I'd missed. And wondering when exactly my instincts had stopped trusting her without question. It's strange how your brain works when it's trying to protect you. All those tiny moments, the shrugged comments, the faint glances, the conveniently timed phone calls, they all get stuffed into a mental junk drawer. Things you notice but don't examine. Until one day something clicks and suddenly you're dumping that drawer out on the floor, sifting through every forgotten detail, desperate to understand how you missed what now seems so obvious. That morning, I woke up before Casey. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with questions I didn't have the courage to ask out loud. The shirt was still in my head. But more than that, it had opened a door I hadn't realized was closed. I started thinking about the past few months. The changes. Subtle, sure. Easy to ignore if you wanted to. And I had wanted to. God, I wanted to so badly. Take the business trips. They'd started out normal enough, quarterly meetings, conferences. But lately, they'd grown more frequent, less structured. Last-minute bookings, vague itineraries, and oddly short durations for cross-country flights. She'd be gone a day and a half and come back with barely any notes, no real follow-up. When I asked how the presentations went, she'd smile and say, fine, before redirecting the conversation always with an oddly timed compliment or a question about my day. It didn't register then. Not fully. I chalked it up to the stress of her job. She worked in client strategy, which meant lots of late hours, lots of schmoozing. I convinced myself that I was being overly sensitive, maybe even a little insecure. I mean, I've been working from home since the shift in tech 2 years ago. She was the one out there in the world, doing things, moving up. It felt wrong to question her. But now? Now I saw it differently. Especially the way she guarded her phone. At some point, I can't even say when exactly, she started deleting her texts. Not just individual messages. Whole threads. Her call log too. I noticed once when she was showing me a funny photo. I saw the recents tab, only 2 calls, both from me. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. I like to keep things clean, she'd said with a laugh. You know I hate clutter. Clutter. That was the word she used to describe digital footprints. And the location sharing, that was another one. We used to share locations all the time. Not in a possessive way. It was just convenient. If I saw she was near the grocery store, I'd text her to grab milk. If I was out on a run, she could check if I was still alive. Nothing controlling, just routine. Then one day, I noticed I couldn't see her location anymore. When I asked, she played dumb. Weird. Must have been a phone update. I'll fix it later. She never did. And I didn't bring it up again. I remember thinking I was being ridiculous. Like I was risking sounding controlling or paranoid. And I didn't want to be that guy, the clingy husband who reads too much into a tech glitch. So I let it go. But now, standing in the kitchen with my half-burnt toast and a coffee that tasted like regret, all those weird moments started lining up like dominoes. And then there was the distance between us. Not physically, necessarily, we still shared a bed, still brushed our teeth side by side. But something had shifted. I started to notice how often she turned away when we slept. How her goodnight kisses were shorter. How her body language closed up subtly but firmly. She used to reach for me in her sleep. I hadn't felt her do that in months. And there was always a reason. Always something understandable. I'm just exhausted. I had such a long day. I need a shower first. Some nights, she'd be asleep before I even came upstairs. I'd walk in expecting to talk about our days, maybe unwind together. But she'd already be face down, one arm under the pillow, completely shut off from me, like I'd missed my window and now I didn't exist. I stopped initiating after a while. I didn't want to feel rejected. Didn't want to make her feel pressured. I told myself it was a phase, that people go through ups and downs. That married life wasn't a romantic comedy. And then there was Bryson. God, I should have paid more attention to Bryson. I'd met him once. Tall, polished, full of corporate charm. He worked in investor relations, one of those guys who wore tailored blazers to casual Fridays and called everyone champ. Casey used to complain about him all the time. He's the kind of guy who'd bring spreadsheets to a beach day, she'd once said with a roll of her eyes. But that changed. Slowly. First, she stopped joking about him. Then she started mentioning him in casual conversation. Things like, Bryson and I stayed late to prep for the pitch, or Bryson thinks we should explore that market, like he was part of every decision now. Every meeting. Every trip. I tease her about it at first. You two attached at the hip now, or what? She'd laugh. He's harmless. Just really good at what he does. Eventually, I stopped joking. Something about the way she spoke about him changed. Her tone softened, lost its edge. Sometimes she'd mention him and then glance at me quickly, as if to check my reaction. It was subtle. So subtle I convinced myself I imagined it. But that morning, with all the red flags swirling in my head, I opened my laptop and started scrolling through her company's press releases. Just looking. Just curious. There he was. Bryson Cole. Senior Investor Relations Manager. Recently promoted. There was a picture of him shaking hands with one of the partners at some retreat in Tahoe. Casey had gone on that trip. She said it was all business. Said it was boring. But I remember her coming back unusually upbeat, like she'd had the best sleep of her life. I clicked on the photo and stared at his face. Sharp jawline. Perfect teeth. The kind of guy who wears confidence like a second skin. And standing next to him in the background of another picture, Casey. Laughing at something he said. Her head tilted. Her smile natural. Her body angled toward him like gravity pulled her that way. And I wasn't there. I remember closing the laptop gently, like slamming it would somehow confirm what I didn't want to believe. I sat there at the dining table, the morning light spilling in through the window, making everything feel too bright and too still. I heard the soft creak of the stairs, Casey coming down. I quickly opened my phone, pulled up an old news article about AI market trends, something I could pretend to be reading. She walked in wearing leggings and a loose gray hoodie, her wet hair tied up in a bun. She looked fresh, calm, like she hadn't noticed the way things were shifting. Or maybe she had and she was just better at pretending than I was. Morning, she said, yawning. Morning. She kissed the top of my head and opened the fridge. Got any meetings today? She asked. Couple. Just a client sync and then internal stuff. Cool. I'm out most of the afternoon. We're meeting with that new fund rep downtown. We? Me and Bryson. Of course. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. I felt like I was watching my life through glass, unable to move, unable to reach out, just witnessing it drift further from me. She didn't notice. She poured oat milk into her smoothie, humming to herself. I finished my coffee and left the table. The thing about red flags is they don't come waving in the wind. They come quietly. Camouflaged as logic, as routine, as compromise. Until you can't tell the difference between trust and denial. But once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. And I was starting to see everything. By the time Friday rolled around, the knots in my stomach had become a daily fixture, like background noise I couldn't mute. Every ping from her phone, every late meeting, every brushed-off detail sat in me like a stone. Heavy. Unshakable. Still, I kept telling myself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm tired, overthinking, drifting into paranoia. But deep down I knew. That morning started like any other. Casey was already up before me, bustling around the bedroom in that distracted, no time for conversation way. She'd thrown on a blouse I hadn't seen in a while, black silk with a plunging neckline she usually saved for events. Her heels echoed faintly as she crossed the room to grab a pair of earrings from the dresser. You've got something tonight? I asked casually, watching her through the mirror. She paused just a beat too long. Yeah. Client dinner downtown. Bryson and I are meeting a rep from the Cotillon Group. Could be a big contract. Just you and him? She nodded without turning. Mum, small table. They want to keep it lean. I sipped my coffee, letting the silence linger. Want me to pick you up after? She blinked at that, surprised. No. I'll probably Uber. Drinks, you know? Don't want you waiting around. I don't mind. She smiled, tight-lipped. Seriously, Alex, it'll run late. I don't want you getting stuck in traffic for nothing. Nothing. That word sat in my chest like a nail. She left the house at 5:30. Said the reservation was at 6. I watched her drive off from the upstairs window, her taillights disappearing at the end of the street. I waited 5 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what I was doing. But something inside me, the same voice I'd been ignoring for weeks, was now screaming. And this time I was listening. I drove toward the city, taking side streets to avoid Friday gridlock. I wasn't sure where they'd gone until I remembered a name she'd mentioned in passing a week earlier, Edda's. Some upscale restaurant with all the pretension of a hotel lobby. Soft jazz, sculpted plating, wine menus longer than the actual menu. When I got there, I parked across the street and sat in the car for a few minutes watching. And then I saw them. Through the massive glass windows, just beyond the potted palms, Casey and Bryson were already seated. Their table was small, in asterisk mate, tucked in a corner like they wanted privacy. Candles flickered between them, but that wasn't what got me. It was her face. She was smiling. Not the work smile. Not the stiff, polite one I'd seen her use 1,000 times in meetings and video calls. This was different. Relaxed. Open. Soft in a way she hadn't been around me in months. He leaned forward, said something. She laughed, a head tilted, eyes down. Then he reached over the table and brushed a piece of hair behind her ear. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. And she didn't flinch. She didn't look around, didn't pull away. She smiled and nodded, her eyes holding his like nothing else in the world existed. Then it happened. He leaned in and kissed her. Not on the lips, not yet. But on the temple. Light, familiar, deliberate. And she closed her eyes. I didn't move. Not right away. I just sat there in the car, frozen, staring at the two people who had built an entire illusion around me. The scene didn't feel real. It was like watching strangers in a play I wasn't cast in. The people at the surrounding tables kept eating, kept sipping wine, oblivious to what that moment meant to me. To them, it was background ambience. Two coworkers leaning in. To me, it was the truth, undeniable and complete. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking slightly, but I held it steady enough to snap a photo through the glass. Just one. Casey mid-smile. Bryson's hand still on the table near hers. The candlelight between them. A perfect little lie, immortalized in pixels. I didn't confront her. Didn't storm inside. Didn't make a scene. That surprised me. I always imagined I'd explode in a moment like this, yell, demand answers, flip a table maybe. But instead I felt hollow. Not numb exactly. More like everything inside me had been swept clean, as if someone had turned off all the noise. I drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Just me and the low hum of my engine as the sky turned dark and the streetlights blinked on one by one. When I got back, I didn't know what to do. I wandered through the house like a ghost, passing photos of us smiling on hikes, cards from anniversaries, furniture we'd picked out together like it meant something. I ended up in the office, sitting at my desk with the photo still open on my phone. Proof. It was all I had. And yet it was more than enough. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning but weirdly calm. Every memory we had now felt tainted. Every fight, every apology, every moment of silence between us was being rewritten in real time. Around 2 a.m., Casey came home. I didn't pretend to be asleep. She stepped in quietly, heels clicking on the tile. She moved like someone trying not to wake a child, slow and rehearsed. I watched her silhouette pause in the hallway, maybe deciding whether to check if I was still up. She didn't. Just went upstairs. No kiss. No whisper. No, how was your night? I stayed on the couch, staring into the dark. She had no idea what I'd seen. No idea that the performance was over. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She came downstairs in leggings and one of my old t-shirts, hair up in a messy bun, coffee already brewing. Morning, she said, yawning. I nodded. She didn't seem to notice the tension. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. I was thinking we could do that thing we talked about today, she said, pouring oat milk into her mug. The farmer's market? I stared at her. She looked up. What? Nothing, I said. Farmer's market sounds good. She smiled. Cool. I could use some fresh air. Fresh air. We went. Bought peaches. Pretended to be a couple. She even held my hand at one point. But the image of her in that candlelit restaurant didn't leave my mind. Every laugh she gave me felt secondhand. Every touch felt borrowed. And I knew I couldn't keep playing along. That night, when she went to bed early, I stayed downstairs again. I pulled up the photo. I stared at it for a long time. Then I created a backup folder on an external drive, encrypted it, named it something boring. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew this much: I wasn't letting this go. Not like this. They thought they were careful. Discreet. Untouchable. But the truth had a way of slipping through cracks. And I'd seen it now. Clear as day. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't usually come all at once. It leaks. Trickles in. First, it's a shirt that doesn't belong. Then a kiss through a restaurant window. Then, if you stand still long enough, you realize you're standing in a flood. The Monday after that night at Edda's started like any other. I brewed coffee, fed the cat, checked my inbox. Casey was already gone by the time I rolled out of bed, claiming an early strategy session with the product team. She left a post-it note on the fridge, little heart, smiley face. Like we were fine. Like I didn't have a high-res image of her cheating tucked inside a drive she didn't know existed. I sat at the kitchen table, reading the note again. Good luck on your review today. You've got this. Her handwriting still looked like the same woman I married. But everything else about her? I wasn't so sure anymore. I had a 9:30 a.m. meeting just to check in with the design leads and a few devs on the prototype branch of our platform build. It was nothing serious. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. When I joined the Zoom call, the mood felt off. Everyone was stiff, unusually formal. No banter. No morning jokes. Just awkward silence before Mr. Collins, the CEO, Casey's father, popped in unexpectedly. Alex, he said, his voice tight. We need you upstairs. Now. No explanation. Just a request I couldn't refuse. I closed the call and made my way to the executive floor. The conference room they ushered me into was all glass and chrome in asterisk mid-18 by design. Inside sat 3 people, Bryson, of course, the firm's head of security, and Mr. Collins, stone-faced at the head of the table. No one offered me a seat. What's this about? I asked, trying to sound neutral. Mr. Collins folded his hands on the table. We've been reviewing internal audit data related to the analytics platform you've been developing. There are concerns. Concerns. Bryson leaned forward. Specifically about protocol enforcement. Source version integrity. We found files pushed through unsecured environments, unreviewed changes to main branches, and data artifacts extracted outside approved access windows. I stared at him. That's impossible. Everything's encrypted, mirrored on isolated backups. The access keys are chained. Except they weren't. Mr. Collins cut in. Not last Thursday. Thursday, the day before I followed Casey to Edda's. I felt my pulse rise. Are you accusing me of a breach? We're not accusing. We're confirming, Bryson said smoothly. Your credentials show multiple unauthorized deployments. Our logs match. That doesn't make sense. I don't. It's already been reviewed, Alex, Mr. Collins said. Legals signed off. This is a formality. I stood there frozen. It didn't even feel real. I had architected that platform from the ground up, designed the encryption model, spearheaded the deployment protocol. I lived in that code. I had led myself to keep it clean. And now they were throwing me out like a liability. They didn't offer a chance to explain. No counter-argument. No audit trail check. Just a security officer stepping into the room and handing me a non-disclosure agreement along with a pre-written resignation form. I didn't sign. I didn't say anything. I just walked out. I remember riding the elevator down alone, holding the envelope in my hand like a death certificate. By the time I got back to my desk, my badge had already been deactivated. My files were gone. My access revoked. The entire system had scrubbed me out like I never existed. That afternoon, I drove home. I barely remember the ride. The streets blurred. The city noise muted behind the roar in my ears. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed something strange. A stack of cardboard boxes sitting by the front door. At first, I thought they were deliveries. But as I got closer, I saw the label on one of the boxes. My name, scribbled in Casey's handwriting. Inside were my clothes, my watch, my hard drives, even the coffee mug I kept on my desk. It wasn't just my work life they'd severed. It was my home too. I opened the door and stepped inside. The place looked rearranged, subtly, like someone had done a deep clean, but only after erasing the parts of me that didn't fit the picture anymore. Casey was in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was just another afternoon. She looked up, startled. Oh, you're home early. I dropped the envelope on the counter. She stood up. Alex. Look, I wanted to talk to you about everything, but did you know? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Did you know what they were planning? Did you help them? She looked away. It's complicated. That answer hit harder than I expected. You boxed up my life, I said, my voice quiet. You didn't even wait for me to come home. Her eyes flicked up. They said you were being let go, that it was finalized. They? Legal. Compliance. My dad. I thought. It was better this way. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Better for who? She didn't answer. I looked around the room. The framed photos were gone. My books were packed. Even the stupid little plant I kept in the windowsill gone. This house is in your family's name, I said. Trust property. She nodded slowly. It always has been. So I have no claim, no rights, no place. She didn't deny it. And that's when it hit me this wasn't an accident. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup. They'd built a system I couldn't fight. Her father's influence. Bryson's access. The fake audit logs. The way they tied the house into a family trust. It was all part of a plan. And I'd walked right into it. I walked past her and picked up the smallest of the boxes. Just my drives, a few notebooks, and a hoodie. Where are you going? She asked, voice trembling. I don't know, I said. But wherever it is, I won't be the one carrying your lies anymore. Alex, wait. I turned to the door. Don't do this, she said softly. You don't have to disappear. We can work something out. Casey, I said without turning, you already did. And then I walked out of the house I'd called home for 7 years, through the door I installed, past the porch light I rewired, down the path I shoveled in the winter, without a single thing to call mine. That night, I checked into a budget motel off I-70. The kind of place with scratchy towels and flickering hallway lights. The clerk gave me a key card without looking up. Room 214. Second floor. Smelled like bleach and stale cigarettes. I set the boxes on the bed, sat down, and stared at the wall for a long time. No job. No house. No wife. No explanation. But I still had my drives. And somewhere buried inside them was the truth. Everything I'd built. Every commit. Every encrypted file and signed protocol. The real work. The history. The proof. And they had no idea I still had it. They thought they'd taken everything. But they forgot the one thing they couldn't erase. Me. I spent the first night in the motel sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the beige wall like it held answers. The room was claustrophobic, walls thin enough to hear muffled TV static next door, the hum of a vending machine just outside the door, the occasional clack of heels across the breezeway. Every minute that passed made it clearer, this wasn't a layover. This was rock bottom. I brought 3 boxes with me. That's it. One had clothes. The second held 2 external drives, my laptop, and a tangle of cables. The third? That was the strange one, filled with half-used notebooks, sticky notes, a few flash drives, and a single photo of me and Casey from a ski trip 5 years ago. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. Not because I missed her. But because it felt like the closing chapter of something I didn't fully understand yet. After sitting in silence for what felt like hours, I plugged in the drives. The screen flickered awake, asking for a decryption key. I typed it from memory, 16 characters long, meaningless to anyone but me. The folders opened like floodgates. Lines of code, revision histories, archived prototypes, failed builds, experimental branches I'd tucked away after Casey's team deemed them not market-ready. I'd saved everything, some out of habit, some out of paranoia. Now it felt like insurance. I stayed up all night, organizing the files. Rebuilding the architecture in my head. I retraced my own footprints, every decision, every discarded feature, every workaround I'd created when they cut my budget or K** led my timeline. By sunrise, something strange had started to form. A shape. A direction. The firm may have stolen my access. But they hadn't stolen my mind. And they had absolutely underestimated how much I remembered. By the end of that week, I had a rough working model up and running. Nothing fancy, just a stripped-down skeleton of the predictive analytics system I'd spent years developing. But this time, it didn't have their branding. Their overhead. Their blind spots. This version was leaner. Sharper. Mine. I kept a strict routine. Wake up. Coffee from the gas station across the lot. Code for 6 hours. Nap. Code again. Repeat. Days bled together, but something started to click. I wasn't rebuilding what they stole. I was evolving it, cutting away the layers of corporate compromise and rebuilding the thing I had dreamed of in the first place. That was the irony. All those meetings, the micromanagement, the bloated bureaucracy, they'd forced me to bury the best parts of my own work. They wanted digestible, easy-to-sell products. Not ambitious. Not challenging. Now I had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. On the 12th day, I got an email. It came through an old address I hadn't used in months, an inbox I kept mostly for junk. The subject line was vague, inquiry on system integration availability. I almost ignored it. But something about the domain caught my eye at Siren Biotech. DK. Denmark. I opened it. Short, direct. We were referred by a mutual contact at Valterra. We're interested in a predictive architecture system that's not yet publicly listed, but we've reviewed your previous publications and suspect you may be its source. We're prepared to speak confidentially. My heart skipped. Valterra was a European analytics firm I'd done a short virtual workshop for the year prior. They'd shown interest in our early version, but corporate *T it down said it wasn't scalable. Apparently, someone had remembered. I wrote back carefully without giving too much away. I requested a secure call the next day. They agreed. We spoke for over 2 hours. The rep on their end, Jens, was sharp, technical, and respectful. He didn't ask how I'd ended up independent. He only cared about the product. What you've built, he said halfway through, could cut our onboarding time in half. Your edge ranking system alone solves problems we've been stuck on for 6 months. He paused, then asked, is it fully yours? It was the question I knew was coming. And I was ready. Yes, I said. The version you're looking at is entirely my design. I can show you the authorship logs, the documentation, the timestamps, everything. I have proof of concept and full version history dating back 3 years. He went quiet for a moment. Then, we'd like to acquire licensing rights. Initially European territory only. Can we discuss numbers? That was the first time I smiled in weeks. 3 weeks later, we had a contract. A real one. I read every line 3 times, sent it to an old lawyer friend of mine for review, and then signed it from a folding chair in the corner of a motel room that still smelled faintly of mildew. They sent the first installment within hours. It wasn't millions. Not yet. But it was enough to clear my debts, relocate, and give me something I hadn't felt since the night I found that damn shirt in the laundry, control. With the funds, I left the motel without a word. Packed the boxes into a rental car and drove 2 states east to a city where I didn't know anyone and no one knew me. I rented a small furnished apartment above a print shop. Paid 6 months up front. No questions asked. And I kept building. I didn't just want to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them what they had thrown away. By month 4, Siren Biotech launched the new system. They rebranded it Prism. Clean, sharp, minimal. Exactly what I'd envisioned before the board diluted the original version into mediocrity. And Prism worked. Really worked. The rollout exceeded expectations by over 40%. Clients who'd once partnered with my old firm Collins and Park started jumping ship. Quietly at first. Then in waves. Because once a better solution exists, loyalty evaporates fast. I watched it all happen from afar. Didn't gloat. Didn't post. Just took notes. Every headline about Prism's success chipped a little piece off the empire that had discarded me. By the end of Q2, Collins and Park's growth projections were revised downward. Their board issued a vague statement about market challenges. Behind the scenes, I imagined Bryson spinning numbers, Casey managing investor calls, Mr. Collins demanding answers, intense meetings. And the best part? They couldn't trace a thing back to me. Because I didn't steal anything. I built it first. And now I had the receipts. At some point, I started getting messages. First, it was a product manager I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Hey man, congrats on Prism. Didn't know you were involved, well played. Then a designer, I left Collins a month ago. Whole place feels different now. You really dodged a bullet. Eventually, one from Bryson. Just one line, let's catch up sometime. Could be worth your time. I didn't respond. Then came Casey's email. Subject, checking in. No salutation. No excuses. Just a message filled with half apologies and questions I didn't owe her answers to. Hope you're doing well. I've seen what you've built. I didn't know it would get to this point. I guess I miss who we used to be. If you're ever open to talking, I'd like that. I closed it without replying. Not out of spite. Just disinterest. Because the truth is, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even curious. I had nothing left to say to people who made decisions based on convenience, not character. I moved again after 6 months. Lisbon. Then Berlin. Eventually Seoul. Places where no one called me that guy who got fired. where I could walk the streets without remembering that glass conference room, that candlelit kiss, or the look in Casey's eyes when I asked if she knew. I didn't stay in one place long, didn't unpack much, but I didn't feel lost. I felt unburdened. My past was behind me. And the future? It was mine again,